Can we get Ernie and Gloria to speak about how they felt about you guys coming in?
Yeah.
Because we've heard them, we've heard their voices, but rather than talk about the experience of living in the estate, the experience of these guys
Ernie, are you up for
coming in.
giving it a...
We was pleased, right? Because I actually went on television a couple of times because I was in a depressive state one time because what they was offering me, it wasn't a fair exchange for what I had. Eventually, I got what I wanted, but it took me like 6, 7, 8 months. I was like, I was sort of in a very depressive state for a while. I didn't want to do nothing with my life, and you see what I had. I had a lovely place, didn't I?
And Ernie used to be the caretaker of the estate for many years as well, so he knew everyone and kind of held it all together, basically.
It's brilliant. I mean, we had the best party in London. You know, Jubilee Party, 77? We must have had the best party in London. It was massive, wasn't it? It was like 1,100 tenants, like 1,100 new dwellings, and all their families, like. And the estate was like buzzing for the whole day. You know, and that's things like that, and obviously, like, now it's nothing. It could never be like that again. Because everybody's drifted away now. I've lost a lot of friends, actually, haven't you? You know what I mean?
So, Ernie, can I ask how does a man in a horse's head on stage communicate some of the stories that you told them and the emotions that you're feeling about the development?
Well, he had to make his own interpretation, didn't he? You know, he knew our situations, he took us on board, and then he had to interpret it, which he did quite well, I believe.
I think it's a thing of listening as opposed to telling.
Yeah, he he just watched us and monitored us, like, didn't you? You know what I mean? That's all you had to do, monitor us. Yeah. And then from that, you could make your own interpretation of what you did. And I haven't seen the whole of it yet, have I? We haven't seen it fully, right? But I was happy with what you'd done anyway.
You were quite clear about that with me.
Yeah,
I remember saying, what do I need to say?
We was open.
What do I need to do? And you said, well, it's got to come from you. It's no good me telling you.
No, you had to find out for yourself. You know, and you did get a feel of the estate, didn't you, for the time you spent there. I mean, you slept on the landing some nights. You stayed in the blocks 10 floors up, in freezing cold, trying to get a feel of the place, And it was quite quiet, wasn't it? There was nothing going on at the time, was there?
I think it's mainly because no one was living there.
Oh, well, yeah. A lot of people had decanted by then.
Yeah, no, we did get woken up a few times.
Yeah, but I say, you made your interpretation, and it's no way is it detrimental to anybody on the estate.
Well, the other thing I think about what you've done, Marcus, is it's not judgmental in any way. It's almost like, I don't know, I may interpret it completely wrong, but it seems open-ended and therefore just kind of intriguing. What is going on here? It didn't feel like a sort of imposing, a big vision in a way. It felt like much more just sort of doing something and seeing how people react.
That was kind of interesting because the night we both slept out on this balcony, and we were in the middle of this very long sort of 60-hour shoot where I guess we were all in a trance because we're so tired and cold. And it was like 4 in the morning or something, and these teenagers started running up the stairs, and Marcus and I were just like, oh, shit, teenagers. And the bird we carried around as kind of a guide was above us and just near the stairs, and they got to the bird and screamed. We're like, shit, bird! And then we were like, and then they're like, oh, it's you. We've seen you for the last couple of days. What are you doing? Who are you? And they climbed into our sleeping zone and just like wouldn't shut up. In the end, you were like, can you go? I want to get some sleep. So, that was potentially a really dodgy situation that was navigated, sort of like the whole project in a way.
I think it was quite important to say that we didn't really have an agenda from the beginning. And that's maybe why we've kind of gone on this sort of very circuitous route around the whole thing and not really been that sure of what the end result will be. But I think the good thing about that is that we've kind of been able to talk to an enormous variety of people, and those people have actually been able to talk to each other through the project. So I think you're asking how sort of someone with a horse on the head could be of benefit. I think the process fundamentally is of benefit on some level.
I'm quite interested that your initial vision was swallows and geese, because I was listening to you guys talking earlier about only having moved, and that notion, and you're talking about the politics of the development, and your vision was of 2 migrating species, and will these people ever go back? Or are they under the seals being shut on? I don't know.
Yeah, but there's also the seal, the high seal, which obviously, the current icon of the redevelopment is the new building. So, I don't know if we can make such a literal translation, but it seems a very clear image in terms of, you know, in terms of the building that is now dominating the Elefest.
Yeah.
You know, and through the period when you would have been there, you know, I see it from my balcony growing every day, you know, so it's such a strong thing to build the creation of that new building. You know.
Yeah, and for me, it was about not prescribing what that ritual should be, that performance, and that was pretty much improvised with Chrome Hoof. And we knew they were amazing improvisers. That's kind of one of the reasons why we worked with them. But I didn't really want anything to be prescribed. We had a beginning point and we had an end point, so we didn't go on all night. But in between that, anything could really happen. But I think what I had to do was just really trust that whatever I saw or came up with, I had to be serious about that and take that seriously. And that's the farcical thing, taking your imagination that seriously. And that's what I've tried to do with everyone we've met, really, to talk about their own personal vision or collective vision, but through their imagination and making that significant. And that's the thing that everyone seems to have a problem with.
Well, also, it's a good thing because it makes it very hard to just dismiss because it's not a genre or anything, you know. And Chrome Hoof, I think, are the perfect band for that because they're not any genre, you know. So you might say, oh, they're heavy metal, I don't like heavy metal. They're reggae, and I don't like reggae, whatever. Because they're not, and anyway, music shouldn't really be thought of in that way. Then it's, you know, there's so many different elements that you can't categorise them, and I felt that the whole thing, that was the best thing about it was that it was impossible to categorise, and so it was almost just doing it was enough.
And because it can't be categorised, it can't be dismissed, maybe.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because if you know, that's what I'm saying. You know, you say, well, as soon as you put something in the box, it's easy for people because you can dismiss it.
Yeah, and I think it still is open in that way. And I think I'm thinking maybe that's slightly negative now because we don't know how to close it. And as soon as we close it, we define it.
Yeah, it's got an end.
Yeah, so it's kind of maybe not have an end. I don't know how it's going to pan out.
We're moving back into your house actually next week.
I live on the nearby Aylesbury. I don't know how aware the Haygate tenants are of the situation on the Aylesbury, but it's another huge estate in Southwark, and we're about to undergo the same process. You know, so what's happening on the Haygate is the developer there was meant to sort of say what their plans were by July, and then it slipped, and then they had to say what, you know, they're meant to say what their plans are by the end of December, and it, you know, sort of so just, you know, what next is, you know, sort of I think, you know, the story. Are you aware of the Aylesbury?
Yeah. And I guess the Haygate is being this dummy, crash test dummy for the Aylesbury, which is quite interesting. I think a lot of people from the council anyway, I think got to learn quick from the mistakes they made on the Haygate, because the Aylesbury's bigger, isn't it?
Yeah, and you know, so I've got all sorts of different sort of, you know, I feel very, very emotional that, you know, my you know, sort of estate is about to be pulled down, but also I get emotional about the subtlety of the processes of you know, the power, you know, because we actually, unlike the Haygate, we had a ballot in 2001 with a very, very clear result that the tenants did not want demolition, and there's a political component to this as well. That, you know, these are both big council estates, and you know, in, you know, sort of this economic climate, you know, where, you know, to me, it's partially caused by the property boom, by the, you know, the ideology that everybody should be homeowners, and that's what we should aspire to, and that property prices need to keep rising. And my vision is that everybody should have a home for next to nothing, and that's what, to me, council housing means is actually, you know, you have a home, somebody builds it, and then you get on and you live there, and it's actually, why should it be part of the sort of like the economic sort of state of affairs? So this kind of like this, all of this sort of shade, you know, sort of I would guess that, you know, sort of the people who commissioned this piece were, you know, shamans, that sort of sounds, it sounds kind of not particularly political. It doesn't sound dangerous, you know. And you know, sort of, I'm intrigued by, you know, the process of, you know, the ticking the boxes, and you know, I bet there was something about, you know, that you had to you know, do about outreach and how many people that, you know, how many people's lives you're going to impact, you know, and there's this, I don't know, so that you know, but I don't know, there's all this stuff that comes through our doors, and the Haygate people as well, I presume, whether, you know, these, you know, sort of really, really expensive brochures, you know, sort of with you know, somebody has spent a lot of time and effort producing these graphic designs. So, sorry.
They said the stress busters on the outbreak.
Yeah.
You'll be all right.
And it's a picture of a vision, of somebody's vision, and it's not being, it's a fantasy, because it's not based on real communication with the real people whose real lives affect.
It's an old model, basically, which is becoming more dated by the day.
Yeah. But the trouble, I mean, lots of the, you know, the council officials that I talk to, they are completely, they're sucked into, you know, sort of, I don't know, you know, they're sucked into a vision which doesn't really correspond with what the reality is. And I just worry a bit that this is sort of like, I don't know, just something to you know, sort of, you know, potentially an event that kind of glosses, you know, it sugarcoats the bitter pill. It makes it all look nice that we're doing, you know, we're providing community arts activities for the community.
Do you feel that you've helped legitimise the council's decision by, you know, being a part of the box tick exercise? They've done the questionnaires, they've had the shaman in, therefore they can evict the residents and knock down the estate.
Well, I think it's interesting to think about where this project came from, and it didn't come from the council. It didn't come from the residents. And it really came from me and Michael. And it was our idea to do it. And we knew in order to do it, we needed to get all these different partners together. And the council was one of those partners, and the residents were one of the partners.
To tell you the truth, the Southwark Council anyway was so busy firefighting, they didn't really get involved in any of you know, box ticking exercises with us. I think they were just, and it's a pity they're not here tonight, because in our sort of summary to them, they just said we were gobsmacked that you actually met so many people as you did and gained so much access. And as I said before, I think they were taken along for the ride because they had to in the end. It wasn't them showing us a little journey. How they ticked these boxes, I'm not quite sure. I think a lot of their colleagues are very critical and also still very nervous. But as we touched on before, we're not there to judge. It's just we're trying to create this very open assessment of what's going on.
It was quite interesting what the gentleman said, and also what you're saying is, you know, in a way, the fact that they're getting involved at all is a bit indicative of the fact that something is, you know, essentially if it was all happening and if the people who live there, if their needs were being catered to and answered, they wouldn't probably have any involvement with this whatsoever. I've got a feeling. You know, and I think it's quite interesting. Because I remember, but the other thing is that it brings up all these questions. Because then I came along and started asking, well, how much of this redevelopment, which I sort of knew something about, but not that much, how much is going to be public sector and how much is going to be private? And it certainly wasn't as much as public sector as there is now. So people had to be moved out. Money was basically being made, obviously.
There is going to be a net loss of social housing.
There has to be, otherwise there wouldn't be the money for it.
Of about a thousand properties between the Haygate and the Aylesbury. There's going to be a net loss of social housing.
Yeah, well, you just have to do the maths, don't you? You have to kind of work out where all the money comes from, and you know, it's got to be private sector, otherwise it's not going to happen.